So these whole things of creating a time, a special time for these families, make these wishes more than just a vacation. Yes, it's an escape. Yes, it's creating a happy time, but it is also just these little miracles that happen in families during the wish. It's because you've carved out this space, just this safe space that's not about cancer anymore. It's about the family and about love.
Kelly, welcome to Grow Healthy, Help People, the podcast that Accordis puts out, where we talk to great nonprofit leaders that are making an impact. And you've got a story, and we're looking forward to hearing your story today. Where are you calling in from today?
Rockford, Illinois, Shay. So here we're about 50 miles west of Chicago.
And this is, I guess, the nice time of Chicago, of Rockford, Illinois weather, right? Things are starting to change. We're middle of the spring. Things are starting to warm up and just be beautiful outside, right?
Flowers are starting to bloom, so we're finally making it out of that dreary winter, and we're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. So looking forward to warmer weather and some summer.
That's great. So you find yourself leading Nick's Wish, the nonprofit that is tied to you and your family and your story, but having a big impact. Before that, tell me a little bit of your story of how your career and what life looked like, and then what prompted you to start Nick's Wish.
Sure. So I guess I am a single mom of 3 boys, so Nick is the youngest of my sons. So I lived with my mother to help raise them, and I kind of climbed the corporate ladder. So I had left college to get married, and that didn't work out. So I had to go back to school and finish my degree. So I went there toting Nick with me. He was in kindergarten, and so went on and then started climbing the corporate ladder. My mom helped me raise my sons, for all of their life. So at one point we had actually 4 generations living in a house together. Yeah, wow. That was interesting for sure. For another podcast.
Yeah, it's another story for another day. So what was your early career like? What did you do day to day for work before you founded Nick's Wish?
All right. For the majority of my career, I worked for a company called Kerry, Kerry, out of County Kerry, Ireland. So you probably never heard of them, but I bet you've eaten something of theirs. So they would be buried in the ingredient deck and most of the foods that you would eat down the grocery aisle. So, like the cherry in your cherry Coke, or, the non-active ingredient in your Bare aspirin. All these different things that you never thought about was something that Kerry does. So my job for the majority of my career was process improvement and implementing systems. Okay. And then for the later part of my career, I headed up their customer care, led customer care, love customer care teams out there. They're just amazing, amazing people, and love to lead those teams.
That's so neat. Okay, so a very corporate job, working for a big company.
Yes.
And then tell me some of Nick's story. I don't know the story, but tell me some of the
A little bit more about me is I probably gave $100 to United Way every year just because I had to. I volunteered for absolutely nothing. I was not that person. Not that person at all. So just so you know, the before Kelly versus the after Kelly.
Okay.
I guess.
Yeah. So tell me some of Nick's story.
So Nick was a natural athlete. He was very charismatic. There was always a group of kids with him. There was always a doorbell ringing of whether or not he could come out. In fact, my other 2 sons were so tired of them ringing the doorbell in the summertime, they would put a sign on the door that says, "Nick is in, Nick is out." They didn't want to, because there were so many doorbell rings, they didn't want to be bothered by all of the answering of the doors. Yeah. So he was, he had a giant heart. People would come up to me and say, "Are you Nick's mom?" "Yeah, he stops by on his motorbike and says hi to me all the time." I'm like, "He does?" This was just who he was. He was a very big people person. So, and that was his. He just was one of those charismatic people.
And so one day you guys had an appointment or something and found out there was a diagnosis, right?
Well, you know, it was, and we hear this a lot with our young adults who are fighting cancer. We see it in other stories as well, not only his. He had inexplainable pain in his back. So he could play basketball and hike, but he could not ride in a car and had a hard time sleeping at night and just chased it for months and months trying to figure out what was going on. And had a CAT scan, and, you know, they said that we don't see anything, and on we went trying to figure this out, and it got to the point where he was now starting having trouble walking. So I had reached out to a spinal surgeon, and I said, hey, will you take a look at my son? He's like, I've looked at everything, there's not much there. And I said, so just so that I know I've turned over every stone, will you do an MRI? And he said, okay, but, you know, there's nothing more there. So they did an MRI, and it was during a snowstorm here in the Midwest, and everybody was tied in, and I got a phone call from him, and he said, hey, can you get out of your driveway and bring your son into my office? I'll open it up. So that's never good a sign when that happens. So that's when the journey started. At first, they thought it was a benign tumor that was wrapped around his spine, impinging his spinal cord. But it wasn't long before we figured out that it was not a benign tumor at all. So on Christmas Day in 2008, we were given the news that that cancer was a cancer called synovial sarcoma. It's a very rare aggressive cancer, and you know, the placement of where it was in his spine made it really difficult for him to survive.
Hmm. And so, what were the next days, weeks, and months like?
Well, you can imagine just the total grief and disbelief, and you know, how could this all happen? And Nick just can't even imagine when someone tells you you have a 25% chance of beating cancer. I mean, it just what's next, and how do you fight this, and what are all these things we have to go through? And it's a whole world of something you don't know, right? You don't know this whole language they're using, everything. It was just very, very scary, very dark, very sad. And then there was this one thing that put a smile back on Nick's face, and it was he was granted a wish from Make-A-Wish. So to him, it was the Willy Wonka golden ticket. So yeah, sure, his friends were going to go off to prom and graduate, but he had a wish. He drove those poor Make-A-Wish people crazy coming up with wishes they actually could not do. So,
How funny.
You know,
remember any of the ones that he wanted that they could not do?
Right. So he just, and I think after a while he just started to come up with more complicated ones. But the first one he asked for was to be on that game show, Deal or No Deal, where they open the briefcases. That, you know, that's not something that they can do.
Yeah.
Every time the phone would ring, they'd be like, oh no, it's Nick. What is he going to be asking for now? And he even asked for a pet monkey. Make-A-Wish can't give away pet monkeys, no.
They can't get
And I'm happy that they can't give away pet monkeys. So, but it put a smile back on his face, and it gave him something to continue to look to the future for. And, you know, it gave him, a lot of the times we hear from these kids, the isolation they feel. They're pulled away from their school and their friends, and they're at an age where they're just blossoming, getting their independence. And then this cancer usually has them fighting in a children's hospital because they have a pediatric cancer.
Yeah.
So they feel tremendous isolation.
And so from that Christmas Day until Nick passed, what was that length of time?
He was diagnosed in 2008, and he passed away in March 9th, 2012. So just a little bit over 3 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was there were times where he was cancer-free, and every single moment where he had the energy to do something, he was gone. He was doing whatever he could. He was living his life. He was with friends, and you know, there were constant friends around. His girlfriend stayed by his side all the time. She would take the L. He was treated at Comer's Children's Hospital, which is the University of Chicago, the children's hospital portion of it, and she would stay with him. I stayed with him the entire time. You know, you learn to sleep on those little uncomfortable couches or chairs, but certainly because of the type of cancer he had, we had to actually travel to Boston for treatment. So we actually spent...
You got a CHOP there in Boston?
Yeah, so at Mass General there, they had a special kind of radiation. It's more common now called proton radiation. But at the time, there were only 5 places in the country that could do it. We stayed out at the American Cancer Society has a facility called the Hope Lodge. Nick called it the Hope Prison. He was in jail. Anyway, but he was out. We were out there for literally 2 months having radiation and chemo out there. They shared treatment with the University of Chicago to help try to give him the best chance of living as they possibly can. So he went through 7 rounds of aggressive chemo, all of that radiation, and then he was, no evidence of disease for about a year, and then the cancer returned.
Okay. So you knew the impact that Make-A-Wish had on Nick, and after his passing, what were your thoughts and what prompted you to begin Nick's Wish?
Well, once his cancer metastasized, you get into this world of clinical trials. And so we traveled all over the country looking for things that it would help. And we had a clinical trial down in Bethesda, Maryland. That's where the National Institute of Health is. And Nick was running around, and he ran into another kid. His name was Nate.
Okay.
And he was telling Nate all about his wishes, probably scheming other ones. And Nate told him that he missed out on Make-A-Wish by 1 month. He was diagnosed 1 month after his 18th birthday. He didn't qualify. So I can still hear Nick just busting through the door at the children's and, Mom, we got to do something. Nate missed out on Make-A-Wish. We got to help. And at the time, I was like, Nick, remember the old Kelly?
Yeah.
Nick,
we're not getting involved in helping lots of people. We're going to
we're trying to save your life right now. So
Yeah.
that was my answer to him. But Nick, this was heavy on his heart. This was important. He knew what it meant to have something to keep you going like this, to have something positive in your life. So that clinical trial didn't work, and fast forward about 8 months later, we are now in Arizona at a different trial, and the doctors ask us to spend the night, and they're going to do a quick bronchoscopy in the morning to check out his lungs, and that seems fine. So we're in the hotel together again, and I'm emailing every doctor I can possibly find to figure something out, and Nick says, "Stop, Mom, stop. I want you to come here and listen to a song." So he plays for me a Dave Matthews song, and the words were, "To change the world, start with one step. However small, the first step is hardest of all." And he talks to me again about Nate. And he tells me how important wishes are, and that if he asks me if I will help him do something about it. And I said, "Well, listen, Nick, when this is over, I'll try to do something." The next morning, he was up bright and early, totally not Nick. He was on his way to this bronchoscopy so fast, he had to come back and take my briefcase. And we finally got in there, and the doctor came in and said, "How are you, Nick?" And he said, "I'm afraid." And Nick was never afraid. He'd gone through horrific treatments. And I was shocked. And he said, "Yeah, I'm afraid I'm going to go to sleep and not wake up." And the doctor said, "It's 20 minutes. You'll be back here in 20 minutes." And so I worked for an Irish company, and I'd gotten him a sterling silver Irish cross, and he gave it to me, and it was gold. And I was so shocked that it was gold, I took a picture of it. I'm like, "Well, why is this gold?" And they started to wheel him away, and he said, "Stop. I want to go back one more time and tell my mom I love her." And I said, "I love you. I'll see you in 20 minutes. And he got into the operating room there, and he thanked everybody in the operating room for what they were doing for him that day. And during the 20-minute procedure, the tumor invaded a major blood vessel, and he bled to death in the arms of the doctors that morning. Nobody saw that coming, except for Nick. During the night, he wrote 3 beautiful poems. He updated his Facebook page and said, "I love you, Mom. I couldn't have done it without you." And of course, in the minute of that shock, the wish thing, nowhere in my mind at all. I mean, I'm in Arizona alone with him, right? And it was just horrifying. It was a terrible moment that I never want to think about too often. But weeks and weeks and months went over, and Nick was very persistent in his life, and in his afterlife I find him very persistent as well.
Yeah.
He just kept coming back to me in my dreams and saying about this wish thing, until finally I was like, I gotta figure this thing out. So I called his oncologist, Dr. Pinto, and I said, I thought he was gonna think I had lost my mind. I was like, oh my, so I was kind of sheepish. I'm like, Dr. Pino, Nick had this idea. And I told him all about the idea. And Dr. Pino told me, Kelly, Nick was spot on. There are no programs for these kids. Nothing. We see it every single day. If you want to do, please try to do something. So, of course, this is a world I knew nothing about. Thank goodness for family and friends. We put together our first fundraiser. We raised enough for 5 wishes, and the first wish we gave away was to Nate, and that was 450 wishes ago.
Wow.
So that is why Nick's Wish got started. It had nothing to do with me. It had everything to do with Nick.
And that was somewhere around 2012, 2013, is that right?
Yeah, so Nick passed in March, and we put the first fundraiser together in October. It's called Nick's Home Run. We still have it today. This year will be the 15th year, and hopefully we'll hit 500 wishes, 15 years and 500 wishes later.
Wow, that's incredible. And so the specific mission of Nick's Wish is to grant wishes to children or adults that are 18 to, like, what's the age range, or what's the setup?
18 to 24, kind of that college age time
Yeah.
frame, yes.
Not, legally an adult, but they're still kind of in that developmental phase of life, and they're not on their own yet. They're still usually living at home or with parents in some capacity.
Exactly, right.
Wow.
Yeah.
How neat. So 500 wishes, that's the goal?
That's the goal this year, is to hit 500. So
Hit the 500th wish.
it takes a lot of fundraising to do that, and of
Yeah.
course there's a lot of volunteer wish makers. We call them the heart and soul of our organization. That's probably the one of the proudest jobs that I have, is to be a wish maker for these young adults.
Yeah, so give me a couple of, like, maybe 2 stories of awesome wishes you've been able to grant, just to give me and the other viewers like an idea of the types of wishes you guys are granting.
Yeah. So it can be really. We don't do anything practical. So we take the gold standard from Make-A-Wish because they're amazing, right? So there's no issue there. But so we probably, some of the coolest wishes maybe weren't the sexiest wishes that you've ever seen, but we did a wish for a young woman, and at first she wanted to go to Hawaii. That was her wish, but her body would not let her make that trip, and so she said, hey, can we pivot, and I'd like to get an RV, and I'd like to take my dog and my family back to Montana, where I'm from, and have a family reunion. So I'd never done an RV thing. So there's this thing called outdoorsy, right? And so I didn't know it, but I found it, and I put the thing out there looking for an RV, and I barely hit send, and my phone rings. And it is a man. He's on the other side. He said, we're St. Jude's family. We have an RV. We want to help. These kind of miracles happen to us all the time. So we were able to put that together. They weren't very far from her, so her mom drove her dog and her sister all the way from Illinois all the way to Montana for a family reunion. They had a beautiful family reunion and came back, and we didn't know this shortly after the wish. She wasn't in pain the entire time. She was able to lay down in the RV. When they returned, and she passed away shortly after that, and her mom shared with us that during that trip, it was so meaningful to her, not only for the trip, but her daughter was able to share with her a very special spot in Montana where she wanted her remains spread. So these whole things of creating a time, a special time for these families, make these wishes more than just a vacation. Yes, it's an escape. Yes, it's creating happy times. But it is also just these little miracles that happen in families during the wish. It's because you've carved out this space, just this safe space that's not about cancer anymore. It's about the family and about love.
Wow. As you're talking, I'm thinking, man, I don't know that I could do what you're doing. Holding it together and having the impact, but knowing that every story, every person you're serving has a hard story. 100% of them. And they don't all end up good. Some end up with complete healing and, healthy life for decades, and some don't.
Right.
And what you're doing is so neat. So you have fundraising events. I was looking at your website. There's something about something but pork roast or something like that. I thought that's
We
kind
have
of
the craziest events. You know, we deal with a sad subject, so we try to just blow it up with fun events. So we have this thing called Nothing But Smiles for young adults
that's
fighting
good.
cancer, and we actually sell pork roast or Boston butts,
Yeah, yeah.
aka pork butts. So that's the Nothing But Smiles. So these are, we pre-sell the butts, and they're 5 to 7 pounds, fully smoked. And then you pick them up before the Memorial Day, and then you put them in the crock pot, and you have pulled pork sandwiches for 17 to 20 people. So it's really cool.
How neat. And so per a year annually, you'll have how many different fundraising events or programs, or what's the way that you're able to see revenue come in? Because you guys are a, not large, but you're a sizable organization and doing very well. What is the way that revenue comes in?
We beat the streets. We beat the streets. We have about 4 fundraisers during the year that are ours. We also have other people who make us the charity for their fundraiser. So we
Okay.
show up at a lot of different places. But we also go out to corporate sponsors and we tell them the story. We tell them the gap. You know, there aren't any government grants for what we do or anything like that. So
Yeah.
we have corporate sponsors who lean in and give us help, these multi-year commitments, which are really great for us because, you know what, we get emergency wishes. And even though we may have budgeted for this many wishes, we don't know how many will come in that cannot wait 3 months or 6 months. They have to happen. I have one that came in last week that needs to go next week. Cancer doesn't care. And so we have to pivot, and we have to have that money, and we have to be able to deliver that wish, or there won't be one. So we're just really blessed for individuals and corporate sponsors who come in and just help us make that happen. We're all volunteers. We have one employee. The rest of us, including myself, are all volunteers. We just want to make sure that as much of this money gets to these wishes, and we can deliver as many as we possibly can.
Wow. That's incredible. So Kelly, you come from a big corporate world. Now you're running a nonprofit that's growing in impact, and your story is a hard story, but also you're able to make so many impactful connections to people around the country. Is it just in the U.S. or is it outside the U.S. also?
Just in the U.S. for now. So maybe one day, I guess my big, hairy, audacious goal is to be the next Make-A-Wish for kids 18 to 24. But for right now, we'll take it one day at a time. And God keeps opening doors, and we'll just try to be brave enough to keep walking through them.
That's so great. So as you run the nonprofit, what are areas of running a nonprofit that feel cumbersome and challenging to you?
All of them. I'm just kidding.
Oh, yeah.
Every day is, it's a balance between the program, which is making sure we're delivering the same wish experience, and it's a good experience, and it's not a hurried experience, and we're engaging the families in a really good way. And yet the flip side of it is more of the development, trying to get more and more funds and more and more people, and even getting the word out there is tough. Young people today, I could put out radio commercials or other things, but they're listening to things like podcasts. So thank you so much for having me here. This is how we reach them, and it's for me, that maybe some of the digital ways aren't exactly, how would I say, second nature to me.
Sure.
So I've got to try to learn and get more people around me that know those types of things.
Yeah, that's great. Well, as you and others that are leading in nonprofits that are having a mission impact find that work piling up in your plate, Accordis, our company, that's what we do. We say, hey, you go accomplish the mission, let us handle the office work. So we've got an awesome team that does accounting, marketing, database, really any back office for nonprofits is our strength. So if you're watching this podcast, and Kelly, you also, if you're interested in what Accordis does, accordis.com is our website. I'm going to put, and your website is, there's nicholasrichfoundation.org, but is it nickswish.org, or what is the website, Kelly?
It's nickswish.org, so N-I-K-S, no C, N-I-K-S wish.org, nickswish.org.
So if you're interested in getting involved in Nick's Wish, you can reach out to Kelly or her team there at nickswish.org, N-I-K-S. We'll put that at the end of this podcast also. And if you want to donate, this is a great opportunity. She and the team there need revenue, need money coming in to provide these wishes, and the impact they're having is great. So Kelly, thank you for taking the time this morning to be on our podcast. Thanks for the work you're doing. The work you're doing matters. The impact is huge, and you're serving a group that needs to be served. So thank you for your work.
Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.
Have a great day.
You too. Bye.